here to help you with breeze, planting seeds and teaching skills. Teachers turn schoolyards to dreams. Oh, hey, school gardens with ease.
Hello and welcome to School Gardens with Ease podcast. I'm your host, Leila, and this is episode number 19. In this episode, I want to talk about the single biggest mistakes teachers make when they start a school garden or they want to start a school garden. How do I know what this mistake is? Well, I know it because I've been growing school gardens with hundreds of teachers in the past decade. I've also been called into consultations in for school gardens a gazillion times before. I've seen gardens in private schools, public schools, done by community, done by external vendors, done by teachers. I've seen gardens grown indoors, outdoors, all kinds of gardens actually, from tower gardens to window ledge gardens to outdoor container gardens, raised bed gardens, in the ground gardens, gardens on school grounds, and gardens on public or private grounds that students walk to or travel to. You name it, I've seen it. So, what I tell you today is not a guess, it's something that holds teachers back and creates a lot of trouble for them. It's also the mistake that if they avoid makes their life a lot easier, and it's something that if all teacher knew, probably more of them would grow or would give growing a food garden a try. Can you guess what it is? It's not what they grow. It's not when they grow it in terms of the right timing for the plants. It's not how they grow it, even where they grow it. Even though there's plenty of avoidable mistakes you could make in those areas, but I consider none of those the biggest number one mistake. The biggest number one mistake, in my experienced, educated opinion, is teachers trying to grow a garden outside their class time. And before you go ballistic on me, yelling all the reasons why you can't do this in your classroom time, hear me out, okay? Let me first tell you why trying to grow a garden outside your classroom garden is the biggest mistake you could ever make. And then I promise that I will tell you how you could do this in your class time, okay? Just bear with me. There is a method to the madness of my advice always, okay? A classroom or school garden is, before anything else, an educational tool. So trying to grow it outside your class time makes absolutely no sense. A lot of teachers think the garden should be there first and then they should, engage their class with the garden. And I don't blame them. If you search on the internet for educational books, guides, or even lesson plans, you most likely find plenty that tells you how to use the garden, not a lot that tells you how to grow one. There's things like how to save seeds, how to observe plants, how to run sessions to record and journal on the garden creatures, etc., etc. I actually recently bought a fantastic book called The School Garden Curriculum. I was so excited for it because it was the first book I could find with its entire focus on providing lesson plans. And you know me, I put a lot of weight on lesson plans. In fact, my paid programs their main focus is providing done for you lesson plans. So I thought, finally, someone other than me is providing lesson plans. Yay! Believe it or not, sometimes I feel pretty lonely in this field of work. So when I see that someone else is doing what I do, I get excited. So I ordered the book and I got it, and I looked and looked and read and searched, and the majority of the lesson plans were assuming there was already a garden. Don't get me wrong, it's still a fantastic resource. I totally recommend it. I don't get any kickbacks from it, but I really think it's a good book. Go and buy the book. But again, majority of what's in there is useful if you already have a garden. What if there is no garden yet? The assumption most teachers have is that they need to get a garden going somehow outside of their class time. For example, hire somebody to come and set it up for you, plan a community planting event and get people to donate time, plants, supplies, and come together and get it growing, etc., etc. And then engage the students during class time. What I'm trying to tell you is that designing, building, growing, and maintaining a food garden can and honestly should be part of the education. School gardens are not just any educational tool, they are hands on experiential teaching tools. And building and growing the garden is part of that education. In fact, I always go as far as to say it's not a school garden if it's not grown during class time. You might be like, okay, sure, I get it, Leila, that growing it outside of class time doesn't make sense. But that doesn't fit the dramatic announcement you made that this is the single biggest, worst mistake you can ever make. You're right. Let's get into that. When you want to grow a school garden outside your class time, all of a sudden this becomes a project on top of everything else that you have to do. We all know that teachers' plates are always overflowing, and adding one project like this, big project like this, requires a lot of time outside of class time. That is a big deal. It's a no for those wise teachers who know how to set boundaries and how to protect their time and energy. And it's a source of excitement at first, but quickly frustration, exhaustion, resentment, and overwhelm for those naive enough to say yes to it. Don't ever say yes to growing a garden outside your classroom time. I'm serious. It's the biggest mistake you could ever make. And not just because it's going to be a lot of backbreaking, time consuming work for you, or because it won't be educational enough, but because it won't even work. Or if it does by spending way too much time, way too much energy, organizing and managing way too many people, or spending way too much money. Honestly, even thinking about it makes me feel exhausted. Gardens that are not grown by students while they learn the science, math, language, and social concepts behind it will not have the sense of ownership that it needs for the garden to flourish. A garden needs to be watered every day that it doesn't rain, including all those summer days. It needs to be harvested, pruned, taken care of, essentially. Growing it requires consistent tasks to be done in a methodical way on a fairly strict schedule. If the work is not done during class time by your students, that means you'll need to either do it yourself or with the help of other teachers or parents. Coordinating all of that between people is a lot of work. People will make mistakes. One day, nobody shows up to do the task, and another day, three people show up for it. The jobs will not get done properly and on time. And the whole thing becomes a huge mess. I mean, ask the community garden organizers. They will tell you that this is a full time job. Last time I checked, you already have a full time job. Unless your full time job is a gardening teacher or, for the whole school or a garden educator of some sort, that this is your full time job. In that case, you're lucky. Your school's lucky. Your students are lucky. I wish every school had one of you. Chances are, though, that you are a regular classroom teacher responsible for teaching, if not all, many subjects. You don't have time to grow a garden outside your classroom time. You just simply cannot afford it mentally, emotionally, financially, time wise. In no way you can ever afford this. That's why it would be the biggest mistake you could ever make. And if you get a garden grown outside class time, and then try to get your students engaged with the garden chores, you will quickly realize the ownership taking care of a garden requires is just not there. Your students will just not care that much. They will look at it as chores, hard work. They will call it child labor and constantly drag their feet and nag the entire time. I don't know what you call that. I know what I don't call it. I don't call it engagement. Now you're probably thinking, okay, Leila, I'm convinced I should never grow a garden outside my classroom time, but that unfortunately means that I shouldn't do it at all because there is no way I could use my class time for another project. It's already full. No extra minute left to do anything else. If we have an extra minute, we should actually try to use that to catch our breaths. I agree. I totally do. Growing the garden should not become a new project on top of everything else. But I bet, well, I actually know for a fact that it connects to so much of what you're already doing. So much so that it could be a huge help to teach other subjects. Do you have to teach about soil, water cycle, biodiversity, plant life cycles, physics of liquids, sunlight, the energies on this earth, the earth, seasons, the environment in any way? Did you have a plan to have activities that foster teamwork, collaboration? Were you looking to teach your students about the food system, its shortcomings, and the social justice that relates to it? Did you have anything in the curriculum to teach food literacy? What about nature arts? Can you connect the garden to language? What about math, measurements? Do you know how much math goes into designing a food garden? A ton, actually. I'm sure your brain is already coming up with a gazillion other connections. My point is, this is not a new project on top of your plate. It's actually the opposite. A garden is a teaching tool that facilitates teaching other subjects in a new, exciting, and innovative way. And the best part? It increases engagement and deepens learning significantly. And you also get tomatoes. There's nothing better. So, how can you grow the garden in your class time? By connecting it to your curriculum. How do you do that? Of course, by having lesson plans. But before you jump into writing lesson plans to connect growing a food garden to your curriculum, let me warn you about the biggest mistakes teachers make in writing those lesson plans. If you don't mind, I'll tell you all about it in the next episode because this episode has already gotten pretty long and this topic deserves its own time. I'll talk to you next week in another episode. You've listened to the entire episode, and for that, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And please share this episode with other teachers who might be interested in this topic. See you next week for a new episode.